Isn't that so pleasant? Just the crickets just going on, all the little things, all the little critters in the country, thinking everything is fine, incrementally being stomped on. And everyone feels, apparently, that as long as it's not on their neck, it's okay. That isn't going to cut it. I don't know how many more times I could say that, and then people will tune away and think that there's another answer someplace else, or they can understand what to do all by themselves. This is not about all that. It's about finding something that's wrong and changing it. And there's a plenty of things to change on our part. And it's the point here is that by definition means something's going terribly wrong. And literally every moment that you spend not doing something, finding something to fix, something to make right, as I would say better, not fix. I mean, I don't know if we can fix this. Some of this just requires that it's going to be a dismantling. I don't know that we can come this late with this ignorance, finding out that we've been duped, to be able to actually be smart enough to write a structure that's better. I'm kind of doubtful. In fact, we're getting evidence of that in the mining community. A bunch of people who don't know what they're doing, fixing a problem they don't understand. Actually, it's a number of problems with things that they don't have a clue about. All to stop the pain. Just do the wrong thing. It's just something, but let's do the wrong thing. And I bring every week. I bring these evidences of things around you to help, because we all need to maybe pitch in to stop this. Otherwise, it comes on us. Pretty soon, you don't even know what's happening to you. Last week we talked about. Tried to bring it through just the idea, just touchstones to find out, to show you what's going on in this corporate world we're moving into, and the corporate authority. Corporate collective consequence is what I termed it back before 2000. Watching 2001 show up. Why my response to September 11th was they went and done it. And then watching how they said things were now going to change, and they certainly have, and no one said anything. Crickets. But we also bring on, I come after the NDA, I bring on this idea of silent weapons of quiet wars and data and corporatism and all this, and we're all focused on NSA, and we don't realize that corporate structuring is what's really killing us, and we see about TPP and TPIP and all these things that I broached to you last week, though I'd been on my tabs here a long, long time. I'm finally getting down to the end of most of my tabs. I hope I can really finish through them today, and we'll get started on a new project to expose to you who's doing it, not by opinion, by their own words. We'll get to that, and how that big data, or data, as I called it, as a Silent Weapons Quiet Wars called it. I said that's big data. They didn't go that far. This corporate control is corporate possession. You see the transition and change, agents moving people as corporations too, and then disregarding your peopleness, putting you back into the statutes that make you a human, the little monster that you are, a little animal. And I can point to you the code that shows you're not just an animal, you're a pest animal. You're worst of any pest animal in the world. If you didn't understand what the sustainable development was really about. And that the property, you don't have much. It's going to be all in the corporate holding. And then last week I touched a few things that shows that corporations are now making a bid, at least on the software side, for their possession of technology, to the point that they're now saying you only lease it from them. No, you got to consider that, because I also told you, then I showed you that Levi Strauss is tacking in to this thing with fabrics that are sensory, making sensors, and again, don't forget the big data condition here behind the scenes. They're looking for ways to get as much information on you as possible, for whatever. They still have a problem dealing with it, but that is just going to be a matter of time as they figure out. It'll be something similar to every corporation will figure out what's their focus, and they'll have people that focus their algorithms to pull out data from everywhere in order to focus their attention on specific things. That'll be usually how this will work. But they need to get the sensors that incrementally you don't even know. What I tell you to start fighting now, to start to find something you need to make right, because pretty soon they make it transparent to you. You don't know the wrong because they make the wrong transparent to you. And the way they do that is by, as I pointed out before, and it seems to be coming round and around. It's a methodology. It's monitoring, evaluation, and adaptation. That's what these people do. They monitor. That's gathering the data. They look at the data and evaluate. And then they look at what their objective is, and they apply the evaluation to how they're going to make the objective. And a lot of times this is really pretty simple. What they do is they figure out what your resistance is by the data they've gotten from you, what your frailties are, what your scheduling is, whatever it is they need. They apply the analysis to find out what you don't like or what you're not paying attention to. And the things you're not paying attention to, they don't touch in their scheme. The things that you're noticing, they adjust in their scheme. And so they adapt. They are chameleons. And they adapt. They adapt to you. They adapt to your perceptions. Why I come on and broadcast and I give you all these different places you can look in the so-called news, what I call the notice to you of how they're doing it to you. It comes on incrementally, pretty soon you don't see it. Everyone just accepts it. It's the incremental acceptance. Doesn't matter how wrong it is. Doesn't matter the reflexive law is coming, that it won't matter. It's all, like Einstein says, it's all relative. It's relative to whoever's sitting in the seat of decision as to what they want as a future. You call them judges. I call them felons. Any seated decision that takes its authority and makes a conduct that takes you out of your rights, remedies, and property, or otherwise, and or omits something and does the same thing, and or hands all that to someone who doesn't have the right to have all that, is a felon in the office. And I'm attempting as best as I can know and learn to give people this knowledge before it's impossible to impose, before the people themselves put the shackles on. Again, as I referenced to people, the miners inside, the so-called miners, I think it's coming from an outside force. Some people are tired of the pain, and they'll do anything to stop the pain. In other words, just to go back to work without the trouble. They have no comprehension of really what's going on. Was something I ask you to do. That's the battlefield I ask you all to go understand. And apparently all that must be too much for people, because they don't apparently want to communicate with me too much, and I certainly don't see the numbers of listeners coming in excited that they have a power that they have to bring to bear to the problem, instead of just bringing their hands over the problem, or just giving up, worst of all. At least wringing your hands are doing something that even if it comes in your front door, you might respond. But giving up, that's over. When you've said, there's nothing I can do, it's over. And you're just made it very much more difficult for everybody else, especially if you have an insight. If you have an insight that you can bore down and bring to bear, and you walk away, that's a killer for the rest of us. And the worst of all is think you have an insight, but really don't do the study. Carry it on like you're something, that is bigger than you are, and don't realize the humility that it takes to continue in this war, folks. If we weren't in this war, if we were so smart, we wouldn't be in the war. So I never take this stuff that I find out, even late, as some kind of a treasure. This is stuff we never let go. I'm fortunate at some point in my mind, and I think when you get involved, you'll see in your mind that you're fortunate just to come onto it. And usually just in time. It's like I keep telling you, it's like a foot race. You don't know, your effort might put you past the line at the time when the time comes. We don't know, as we're told, we don't know all that time coming. It's just the fact of the ongoing corruption, the ongoing crime against us. And I ask you not to walk as an accessory to that, and apparently people don't want to hear that. I guess that's even too much work. And so I guess I'm thinking now, I wasn't going to get too more deep. The frustration of not having people act right, the frustration of having people act wrong, the frustration of people buying into sensationalism, that's better to do than to actually get involved. And then at some level I sit understanding myself, I'm just not don't have the tools to convince you that what's better to do. Not to decide for you what to do, but to tell you that there's something to do and to start doing it, please. I'm not a charismatic that way to sell you on anything. This is a self-evident stuff, folks. This is the very basics that we were told. Whatever you think of the founding fathers, I'm not on the record to say that they're much anything more than they set up a system for themselves when they had the opportunity to do it. I think that day is long since passed for us, but they came on with some very, very good ideas, and they told us we were going to have to keep all that stuff, and we didn't. And so we're 40 or so years, 50 whatever years behind the problem. And they're moving it on to the next point where you are the property. You are the beast of burden. I don't know if people appreciate this. I don't know if people appreciate that you're setting up your future and the future of your little ones and your family to be underneath a servitude. I told you that now the corporations are stepping up. Apparently their rights to property are a lot more protectable than yours, like Monsanto able to destroy some neighboring farmers' property with their seed. That's just, to me, a bunch of attorneys that don't know what the hell they're doing to defend property, and a judiciary that allows it. Why? Because they want the corporate existence to come forward, and no one stepped up to stop that. No one has identified who the real culprit is here to stop it and sue that, which we have as a district. I did as part of we had to bring people into the matter where the property was, and so two of us stepped in to go ahead and do that to make sure that the standing that we were making could not be destroyed. It can't be so destroyed when you are a man or a woman as they would like you to believe, and a legal entity doesn't have this kind of standing that they have to really create out of thin air, essentially. And fictions of the court, which still cannot stand against the substance, the material world, if you will, working in action. In other words, you bring the system into subservience by what you do. And here we are again. You have to do that. You're not going to do it by some argument, just throwing it out there. It's a strategy. It's a tactic. It's hopefully you get a couple people to help you, because it is a lot of work, but it's work that can be done to do this. That we're slowly losing the advantage. We're slowly being beset with obstructions and or diversions. They'll put an obstruction and let you go a certain direction, and you think, oh, it's easy going this direction, when in fact you should have been climbing over the rails to get out of those stocks that they have us in, whether it's psychological, physical, or whatnot. Before I go on, last week we were talking about talks. That isn't the only one, but that's the one I thought it's more familiar to Skype. Anybody on Skype can move over to talks. Microsoft, get away from I told you the privacy statement that Microsoft developed when they took on the Skype and changed it. I stopped using that, and talks was more consistent with the way Skype works. It is a work. It is a project under development, but it works. It works fine for what I can see, and it's similar to Skype. So that's the only reason why I've been mentioning that. I don't want to disregard Jitsi. Jitsi, that was, if you go on to reallibertymedia.com, was it Piss Off the NSA? That's the document you're looking for, and it tells you how to start Jitsi up. I've got that as well. Whatever it is, you have to find, these are peer-to-peer type things. Now, Jitsi is actually going through a different server. That's why I thought actually Talks was different, which is peer-to-peer directly. And so, but anyway, there's going to have to be, if you're going to keep communications and you're going to keep them encrypted and secret, away from these guys that make up stuff and away from this incrementalism of the data and figuring you out, and having people that think about things to figure you out while you're all communicating, you're going to have to consider, if you're going to be part of a protection for yourself, you're going to have to consider some mode, whether it's the Talks or Jitsi or some other thing. Maybe, I understand Pigeon's out there, but if you all want to communicate, you'll have to find the same program. So I didn't want to sell, if I'm selling Talks, it's just a project. It's just one that looks like Skype. It's familiar to people. It's like why when I moved over into Linux, I chose something that was consistent with XP. I just wasn't Linux savvy. I used to be long time ago, but all that's like long way memory. So I don't do all that. So I just needed something to continue let me focus on what I do instead of computers anymore and electronics. It's more now into this war that I find that we're in. I can't disfocus, but Linux Lite was what I went to only because it was familiar. XP seems to work really well. There's a couple of failures here and there, but nothing so serious. I'm using it. And as it moves on, people are bringing more to it, understanding the distinctions between why Windows works consistently and why Linux has to come up. So same thing with any project, any program. Jitsi is another encrypted communication. Happens to go through a server you have to sign up to. I didn't want to disparage that. And the point is it's something, if all y'all want to communicate together, you're all going to have to choose one. So I felt that maybe Tox was good because it's familiar to Skype familiar. In other words, and that's important to me. I wanted something familiar when I moved from XP into Linux. I wanted something that was somewhat familiar. It's totally not familiar at some level because I don't get into it that much, but it works. It's been working for over a year and a half. In fact, I just was cleaning up my machine here for the heat. The heat's coming on. It's now the fourth season of, let's see, we got fall, spring, winter. Winter, fall, spring, and August. We're in the fourth season now. And so it gets really hot here in August in the fourth season, so I've got to clean up my machines for dust to make sure I do that. I do it about 2 or 3 times a year, but I realize I don't have to mess with that validation sticker number nonsense. I've had Linux for a year and a half, really pretty much uneventful. And I picked also Linux Lite because it used Debian, which is a much more stable condition for me. And I just realized after a year and a half, I don't need that darn validation sticker. What a leash I can release for myself from. So this is the leash that I realize they're putting on people, that Microsoft is putting on people. This is the data. This is the acquisition. Last week I talked about the corporations taking their products and making them theirs. You can't buy them. And then I moved on to Levi's, and Levi's is making cloth that makes sensors. And these sensors are tied to I'm telling you, they're big antennas when they get down to it. They're tied to your phones. They're tied to whatever is electronically smart stuff. They'll be tied to all that eventually. It'll be in your clothes. You won't even know it. You won't be able to buy a pair of pants without having that stuff in them. And even if you don't have an electrical device to transmit it, they will be antennas. I don't know what we're going to do about that when you're not making your own clothes. You understand they go after everything incrementally. But here it is this week. Soft sensors are breaking into 4 major industries. I just wanted you to know about it. This is moving at the speed of electrons as they move this thing along. And I hear crickets on it, but nevertheless, they are moving. They're very well organized and doing very well. What I could see back in over 15 years ago is really rapidly rolling up. To give them the advantage and find you out. On the initial side, I think it's very cool. On the proper side of the use of this technology, but it's not doing that. It's not going that way. It's apparently the bottom line is the bottom line, and you know about greed. I mean, when that's your focus, it's not going to come out very good, especially if you're not the one pushing it, and that means that you have to be one of those guys that wants to push this. From something as simple as a door sensor at a store to a new age of smart sensors in a rapidly emerging wearables market, the application of sensors has already permeated many parts of our everyday lives. So here's the notice to you that it's already permeated your life, that data is the future, and it's really the manipulation and use of that data by whomever, and you won't know as we move into and find out that you're opted in. The default now, this used to be a big violation. You didn't do anything without to anybody's stuff without asking them. And that's apparently not, that went out the door, folks. No one asked you anything. They then flipped it all around and said, well, if you just use the stuff, that's license that you've given over to be exploited. I don't know where that came from, but that's what's going on. And so you have to know that's the battlefield. And so they're telling you that there's the sensors permeating everywhere. And these soft sensors now correlate with the fabric that Levi's is going to be developing with Google. And I'm sure Apple is right there. Despite the fact that Apple Watches aren't making the break, people that supply parts of Apple Watches isn't breaking even, it's going to be beyond the watch. This is not about you wearing something. The wearables is going to be about you making you a whole sensor, a whole body sensor, and you won't have a choice in it soon. already permeating parts of our everyday life, but the future of dynamic sensor applications goes beyond just measuring your heart rate through a new Apple Watch. It is about how readily available sensor technology can seamlessly intertwine with our daily activities to give us continuous insight into our own health and the way we interact with the world around us. And boy, that's the sugary side. That's what about talking about you. What about those that have access to you? What about that side? And this is the problem, and I start reading this, and I know I don't want to read to you. That's the notice. I don't need to really read no more, and that's the notice. The little message in my head, the little voice says, you don't need to read no more. Maybe people like to hear it being read to. I could go on and on. These links I put in the blogcaster so you can do the work later to see what's going on, to see where the threats are if they're interesting. If they're not, in some regard, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know why I'm here talking if there's only a handful of us, and it is a handful, and it is that we may be doing something, but if that's all we have, I start to wonder what's the reality here? People want to live in this society. It's a pretty scary thought. I can see now as people get older, as they saw generationally things changing, how by the time they get to their 70s and 80s, they're ready to get out of here. Coming in through school, high school and stuff, I couldn't wait to get into all over the world. I couldn't wait to be everywhere just to see the magnificence of the world. And then reality set in. First of all, you probably ain't leaving, and when you get out there, there's probably somebody dying. And so odd wake-up call early on. Really, when I got into the point where you have to do it yourself, the world wasn't what they told us. And then it got worse. And then you run across these Silent Weapons of Quiet Wars documents back in the 70s and 80s, and they were telling us, again, that was the notice. And we apparently don't care enough. Yeah, we give it off, we give it up, and we give it over, and we just say, it's not going to affect me. I've got to have time to live here. I'm not going to be here that much longer. And besides, I'm going to walk down the road, and I'm going to be executed anyway. When did all that become okay? So I'll read some more here. There's a little bit more. This is not just about wearables. Companies with medicine, military, and sport industries have all been increasing their connectivity of the connectivity of their respective products and workflows to the Internet of Things, and have used this connectivity and awareness to create powerful tools that enable better understanding, better analysis, and better decisions. What did I say before, folks? Better understanding, better analysis, and better decisions. I said they do monitoring, evaluation, and adaptation. This is all you're seeing in this article. They're telling us exactly what they've been doing, and they're telling us how they've been doing it. And I give you this information. I think it's important for you to know because I think you care, and I think you'll do something with it. If I'm wrong, markonthebeast@yahoo.com. Let me know. I'll shut up. At some point, I'm really frustrated at one level, and I'm still excited at the other that we can do something. So today must be a frustrating day. I guess partly because I realized that I had to do some research last night on something I just found out about, and I found out our own people are destroying ourselves out of ignorance and stupidity, calling it good, claiming that they know, in an environment that I don't even know that we actually can know. All we can do is we can pick the best path we can prove without question, toss our ego out first of all, and start understanding we got here out of a failure in us, and we will have to contend with that failure in us. And then we come around and we say, okay, we really have to roll our sleeves up. And apparently there's a whole lot of people that aren't going to be doing that. There's just a core of us that are thinking about it or doing it for us. That this stuff is a threat to us, and it's a threat to people whether or not they start figuring out if other people want to say that this is nuts, that you tell them, hey, listen, you're wearing clothes that they're taking all your vitals, and then some people say, well, I don't care. I got nothing to hide. See, this is what I'm telling you, that when they programmed all this stuff out, you don't even expect it anymore. And it's right now, the presumption is on they get to trespass upon you. Think about this, folks, in the property context. That the presumption default is they get to trespass until you opt out. And people are cool with that. Well, in general. I know there's a few people here that don't. I guess the point is we have the tools to be able to explain things to people. And if for us, we have the ability to know all these checks and these private interests are around that are taking action now to make them, put them in a better position than you because they have knowledge that you don't. And we already know through the protocols of the elders of Zion, there's a whole knowledge, a whole long memory about how to take advantage of you. Following that last article of soft sensors, what's interesting to me, I guess, in electronics, a long time ago, this was really a difficult thing to do. These things that they're doing now were very difficult to actually accomplish way back when. Just the material science, the technology, the understanding just wasn't quite there. And now they've got more brains working on it and they're really getting it along. But they kind of knew that, didn't they? They kind of knew that was going to be coming along. It's kind of how things work. It's kind of how people work. You put enough people on something and they get it resolved. I guess that's my point. Put enough people on something and you get it resolved. How about if we put enough people on our problems with these people, these corporations and these governments doing this, and maybe we can solve this. Maybe we can get to that point when we fulfill what we were told was an experiment. We actually fulfill and bring it beyond the experimental stage. My thought about the experiment is that they were going to see how long they could get away with it. And you know, folks, they're still getting away with it. So this experiment has been pretty successful. And it's still an ongoing proof of its success. Because I don't hear nothing but a bunch of crickets, and that ain't going to cut it. This device brings Brave New World to life. A fascinating technology that's going on. That they're putting in on you that you don't even really know about it. How are you going to know about it at some point unless these notices are brought to you? You can pay attention or you're not. If you could have a device implanted in your brain that would bring instant nirvana at a press of a button, would you want it? Last week, a team of researchers developed a new implant that has the ability to wirelessly deliver drugs directly into the brain with the press of a button, like changing the channel of a TV. No wider than the strand of human hair, the device combines brain implants with a remote controlled drug delivery system. With the ability to genetically modify individual neurons, the implant inevitably calls up dystopian fictions from the likes of Vonnegut's Harry Bergeron and Huxley's Brave New World. To demonstrate the amount of control this device is capable of, investigators made mice walk in circles by injecting a morphine-like drip directly into the ventral tegmental area, VTA, of a brain region responsible for motivation and reward. With rapid technological advancements that tinker with the most complex organic structure in the known universe, serious moral and ethical questions are bound to arise. That's where the neuroethicist comes in, but you know, they're not going to be a whole lot of help. Here's the point. The technology is here. They're talking about injecting you with drugs. You would say, well, they have to get them on me. Folks, you understand there's technology out there that uses microwaves that stimulates these same areas. There's nothing now to put the stuff in your clothes in order to have it work, and at a distance they can do whatever they want you to do. I mean, they can even set up a grade. They don't want to make you walk in circles unless they want to keep you from walking out in the street, right? Or they can when they finally want to arrest you, they just make you walking in circles because they have your iPhone now you're wearing it on the back it's a shirt on your back now. It starts to create frequencies that generate responses, your neuron responses, that starts messing with your brain. It's technology today. It's connected wirelessly. It's connected remote. It's operated remotely. You'll be giving license to this stuff as you buy the products. Again, this is what the point about GM wanting the software in the way the engine runs in their computer chips, or Levi coming up to buy the technology and invest in Google investing in the technology for conductive fabrics and now soft sensors. This is all, you see the points being developed in order to do all of this. In this article, I don't read it anymore, it just goes on to explain how this is what it affects in us. This is not any more science fiction. This is happening, and it's happening all the time when you're being told that this is functional wear, functional conditions. I don't, why do I have to expound even on the idea, even if it's as rudimentary as sticking a pouch, collecting you up. They have the right to take your blood, but what about injecting you with what we might, an RFID type capsule? They already do this with contraceptives, but this capsule has a different thing. They inject you, and it's got its own electronics on it, and it just injects you with whatever they want to put into you. And then they make that okay, like they've been able to withdraw your blood. See, they're setting up all the case law to make this right. It's not right. It's not ethical. It's legal, but not lawful. And until people start understanding that and don't run off, I hear lots of people talking about, it's legal, not lawful. Oh, it's the corporate this and corporate that. No, it's not any of that. There's nothing of that involved. That's why I say you got to know the battlefield of what's going on here. These are just tools. It's really not anything. It's an excuse to overwhelm you, obfuscate your thoughts. I don't mean the chemicals. I'm talking about the points they get us incrementally up to this point that we accept trespass as a default. And speaking of that, and I think Grimner and Musker were talking about it on Freakers Ball on Friday night on Real Liberty Media. By downloading Windows 10, you are allowing Microsoft to spy on you. By default, Windows 10, folks. Those of you that have Windows, and I can't get away from that part for the broadcast because two of the programs I need have to run on Windows, and I don't have the time to see if Wine in Linux will make it work. I don't have the time, the downtime to pay for doing this. So I have my old system, one of my old systems, or actually the newer of the old systems, it has Windows 7. I have to keep that for the broadcast condition to work, and so that's where I work. And so there was these updates that I could get, and I found out I don't even do any updates until I have to do research on each update to find out if I want to even take it, because it'll mess up your computer, such as the great product of Windows, that there was two updates that if you took it, they gave you a notice to update to Windows 10. Why are they pushing it so hard? Because this is the next iteration of your incremental agreement to trespass. By downloading Windows 10, you are allowing Microsoft and whomever, third party that they've allowed, to actually spy. It's not even spying now. It's not spying when you've default agreed. You've given them possession access to even your emails. Now, this is not much different than I read in a virus checker. I don't even use that checker. VAST, I think it is. Go read the privacy statement. They said that they may not read your emails unless it's they need to analyze something with their virus, which means they read your emails. Now, how they have this all tied together, I don't know. But Windows 10 now, you give over their ability to interrogate your system and to take information from it by default. They say you can opt out, but is that true? If they have the capacity and you put a little click mark in a little box on a window, does that stop their ability to use that surveillance technology? I think not. You can download Windows 10 if you want, and then I think you should go read the privacy statement, and you're going to find it's the same Skype privacy statement, which I call the no privacy statement. So now we have a choice. Do we go to the new, faster, better, bigger, badder? And it's badder, all right. It's badder like bad used to be when I was younger, not like the newer time. Or do you have to take responsibility and look for other alternatives and hope those are even good, being that we're kind of outside the technology even for Linux or any other operating system that may come down the pike? But Windows 10, for all of y'all that downloaded it, you better, I don't even know why you didn't research to do that, but you may want to reconsider what you've done. You've literally given carte blanche access. There's no crime here that they're taking your stuff. There's probably no crime here when you check the little box that just gives you the indication like you did something, and they're still looking at your stuff. Why? Because there's the law enforcement opt-out clause for them. That if they figure out that you're doing something, they have probable cause to believe they're going to take your stuff. And here, guess what, folks? We're back to the point where they can make stuff up. You can be as innocent as a newborn baby, as innocent can be, and they can make stuff up. And they do. So here's your notice. Windows 10, you by default, If you want to believe in a little opt-out checkbox, I guess you can be a fool and do that too, but that's up to you. I'm not going to make that decision. But this is it. The incrementalness is here. The trespass, the agreement to trespass is on us. And they've come underneath this idea of license to say they can do so. Just by using it. This is what the courts do too. And people don't understand how to argue this one. But they say if you're in their jurisdiction, and they never defined actually what that, so it's up to you to have to prove what that jurisdiction is, a finite place. They say, well, since you're in the state, you don't question that either, you are within my jurisdiction. Simply participating in the space that they want to identify as there is good enough to bring you into a jurisdiction and a treatment. And I say this a lot over time. I don't know if people appreciate what I'm saying. I don't think people appreciate how easy it is for people to undo us, especially those with nefarious ideas. And this whole system appears to be, they've got an outcome. They'll tell you. You can buy into it. This is public buy-in right here. This is what they tell us. All the method. And you're handing them the keys to the kingdom, if I can say it that way, your kingdom and your property. And they are presumptively in the right. And you are going to be, as we understand now, because you've given it over as a contract, you are going to be presumptively obligated. So it's up to you. Upgrade to Windows 10 or figure out that you're going to have to do something else. And, I'm at the limit of my knowledge for no understanding whether or not Linux is any better. I don't really have a clue about that. I can only trust that there's a lot of people looking in that are more knowledgeable than me. All the people that would put me down because I'm some kind of a Windows neophyte that are just now using Linux, those people that think they're so great into Linux, I'm hoping they're so good that they actually see that whether or not at some time someone's dropped a little package on them that they can tell the rest of us. That seems to be the way that community works. So I have a little bit of trust in humanity at that. Well, I didn't mean to insult all y'all. Have to have some trust in the men and women that are behind the scenes that are doing the programming. But having an open source helps a bit. And so we have to make our choices, and we have to take our responsibilities, or we are being played for who we are. And I see so many people saying, well, I don't do anything wrong and I don't care. I'll just stick it back and stick it in their face. And that's fine, I guess, but that's not going to help anything. They're going to continue to move because there's no resistance. No resistance to what? The corporate collective consequence, as I've been talking about. There's money, the greed. We have money, lobbying. I'm sure there's lots of benefits going on behind the scenes. And Jimmy Carter comes out and says the United States is an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery. Okay, that's not news, but this is a past president explaining to us, like we see the Eisenhower military-industrial complex statements. Kennedy made his own statements. These guys come out and they tell us every once in a while something's going on. He's talking about unlimited political bribery going on in the halls of Congress, and that just reminded me of a little phrase that we've heard. It's been attributed to Benjamin Franklin, and did some quick little research. It was talking about when the people learn to vote themselves benefits from the Treasury. It's the demise of democracy. Well, that's two problems. One is you should have never got to the democracy, and number two is you let it go to the point when they could take their money from the Treasury. But I did some quick little research, and it's kind of interesting how uncertain lots of stuff is. Because as I did some research on that statement attributed to Franklin, it came out that maybe Alexander Fraser Tytler had said it, and then it was actually a question as to improper misattribution, because it might have been Alex de Tocqueville who actually may have said that a democracy is always a temporary nature. It simply cannot exist as a permanent form of government. A democracy will continue to exist up until the time that voters discover that they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates who promise the most benefits from the public treasury, and with the result that every democracy will finally collapse due to loose fiscal policy, which is always followed by a dictatorship. Well, we went to gobzillions. That should tell you we're going to be following pretty closely on a dictatorship. This wasn't actually the voters being able to have any vote. The voters here are actually the people, and the people are the congressmen and the senators. If you look very carefully, the people is not you. The people is the House of the legislature. And so they've learned to vote themselves, make laws to pull from the public treasury on both public and private. And you're seeing the demise. And where are we but being sounding like crickets when we started to notice this? And instead of moving to respond to it, we would rather sit and listen to people that would rather talk to us about all the dots they're connecting about Jade Helm, all the FEMA camps, all the other things that are going down, Miley Cyrus's new twerking move, I don't know, instead of focusing on the more important things. It's kind of baffling to me at some level. And I say that, I don't even know why I care at some level. I really don't know why I care at this point. But I do. And so I've got to go with that spirit. I think is more important, because I know we're apathetic naturally and we're lazy, and I rather would do something else if it wasn't so important that I'd do this, even for as little people that really want to interact themselves with the problem. This gentleman had an attribution to this statement about the democracy failing when the voters and the people, it's actually attributed to the people, can pull benefits from the treasury. Remember the gobzillions, I told you it was over. This is a long time back now, and as we move on and keep moving on, Alexander Fraser Tytler as I did some research about this quote, was a very interesting discussion that he has about looking at so-called democracies. And it's very good, interesting insight about this, because he was a bit cynical of the whole thing. He was a lecturer. He was a professor. Going off. A Scottish advocate, judge, writer, a historian who served a professor of university history of Greek and Roman antiquities in the University of Edinburgh. And he did lectures. And Tyler displayed a cynical view of democracy in general and representative democracies such as republics in particular. He believed that a pure democracy is a chimera, and that all the government is essentially of the nature of a monarchy. And just think about how this works, folks, how it's working today, and you just qualify what this guy is saying. In discussing the Athenian democracy, after noting that a great number of population were actually enslaved, he went on to say, quote, "Nor were the superior classes in actual enjoyment of a rational liberty and independence." Doesn't say freedom there, does he? They were perpetually divided into factions, which servilely ranked themselves under the banners of the contending demagogues, and these maintained their influence over the partisans by the most shameful corruption and bribery, of which the means were supplied alone by the plunder of the public money. What did Jimmy Carter just say? Speaking about the measure of freedom enjoyed by the people in the republic or democracy, remember he's now tying freedom to an enslavement, using the word freedom in a democracy and a republic, Tytler wrote, quote, "The people flatter themselves that they have the sovereign power. These are, in fact, words without meaning. It is true that it is true they elected governors, but how are these elections brought about? In every instance of election by the mass of the people, through the influence of those governors themselves, and by the means of the most opposite to a free and disinterested choice, by the basest corruption and bribery. But those governors once elected were in the boasted freedom of the people. They most submit to their rule and control, and the same abandonment of the natural liberty, the freedom of their will, and the command of their actions, as if they were under the rule of a monarchy." Can I read that one more time? And I want you to pick up the accent here for you. It wasn't a nationality language accent. It was the term accent on the word, the term their will. Understand what is at stake here. They must submit to their rule and control. This is the governors you elect, with the same abandonment of their natural liberty, the freedom of their will, and the command of their actions, as if they were under the rule of a monarchy. apply that today, folks. Do we live in that? Is this guy on or not? It's up to you. I'm not going to even make a comment to beyond that. Your consent, folks. Isn't that your choice? Isn't that your free will? Isn't that what it's all about? And we give it over by not responding. Tytler dismisses the more optimistic vision of democracy by commenters such as Montesquieu as, quote, nothing better than a utopian theory, a splendid chimera. I guess we could say chimera. I haven't even looked to see how that's pronounced. It's interesting that it meets up with a DNA today, doesn't it? It's not like we've gone too many far. They're actually physically moving this into reality now. What used to be words of adulteration now is going to be normal. You'll accept that too. The splendid chimera. It's descriptive of a state of society that never did and never could exist. A republic, not of men, but of angels. For while man is being instigated by the love of power, a passion visible in an infant, common to us even with the inferior animals, he will seek personal superiority in preference to every matter of general concern. Or at best, he will employ himself in advancing the public good as the means of the individual distinction and elevation. He will promote the interest of the state from the selfish but most useful passion of making himself considerable in that establishment which he labors to aggrandize. Such is the true picture of man as a political agent. And what have I said as I got in the broadcast but to say we have to humble ourselves and not bring our ego to defeat a lot of this. This is what he's speaking of. You get into these positions and that's what that's what you're after. And that's your downfall. Tytler does not admit that there were individual exceptions to the rule and that he is ready to allow that this form of government is the best adapted to produce, though not the most frequent, yet the most striking examples of virtue in individuals. Paradoxically, because a democratic government opposes more impediments to disinterested patriotism than any other form, to surmount these, a pitch of virtue is necessary, which in other situations where the obstacles of less great and numerous is not called into exertion. The nature of a republican government gives to every member of the state an equal right to cherish views, ambitions, and to aspire to the highest offices of the Commonwealth. It gives to every individual of the same title with his fellows and to aspire at the government of the whole. And this is very critical. This whole. Yeah, it's a big hole without the W. The whole is the whole people, and the whole people is the house of the government. They don't talk about you, and when you look in the statutes, they don't talk about you. They talk about the legislative side of this, which I can now point out that it's been controlled by an outside force. The usurper from within, a domestic usurper that came from within. Tytler believed that democratic forms of government such as those of Greece and Rome have a natural evolution from the initial virtue toward eventual corruption and decline. In Greece, for example, Tytler argues that the patriotic spirit and love of ingenious freedom became gradually corrupted as the nation advanced in power and splendor. How corrupt must we be as the United States of America to be the world dominating brute and bully that this ex-President Carter kind of drives home the point. We're probably at the last gasp of the governments that we have thought was going to serve us. And this gets me back up into so those of you that think that there's a Second Amendment, you better start looking at that. And I don't mean it from the point of a gun. I mean from the right of the people themselves, not the people, not the whole people, but the individual people themselves, to step up and alter or abolish that which ceased to serve them. And I then make a distinction between Tytler's republic and the one that I know, which is where you have a system of government that doesn't rule by fear, intimidation, and dread, as those from within can use bribery and the treasury to defeat everybody around them. But it sits in service, literal service, to protect the property and to manage between disparate ideas in the property. Not the idea of the property, but the property that's actually held by somebody. And in this case, we can get that to each ourselves being a property. Because if you don't, then you're like the mass, and the mass has no protection. Tyler goes on to generalize, patriotism always exists in the greatest degree in rude nations. Can I repeat that? Patriotism always exists in the greatest degree in rude nations. How rude is the United States of America to go bomb and kill people all over the globe? Make and allow conditions and support conditions that allow this. How rude is this? And that's a being a pleasant about the word. I understand the more older the more older language. The word rude was pretty bad here in this context. Patriotism always exists in the greatest degree in rude nations and as an early period of society. Like all other affections and passions, it operates with the greatest force where it meets the greatest difficulties, but in a state of ease and safety, as if wanting its appropriate nourishment, it languishes and decays. It is quote, it is a law of nature to which no experience has ever furnished an exception, that the rising grandeur and opulence of a nation must be balanced by the decline of its heroic virtues. This all coming from my mind based on Jimmy Carter's statement that we live in an oligarchy of unlimited political bribery. And I led to read this guy who has talked about this a long time back. Alexander Fraser Tytler, out of England, knew all about it. It's all an illusion. All these names we put to these governments end up being literal monarchies. It just depends on how many people are considered to be the king. And they do that to hide it, to make it transparent, because the ultimate decision's made by a few. What corruption, and how rude is it, folks, that we've risen up in this nation, United States of America, that we've risen up, and how rude are we that we allow and we find upon the people taking some, whatever they felt was proper to do so. They think they've got a border to protect. They think the policies of the United States are still the same. They don't really understand when they talk what they said, what they meant, what the government meant, or those in the seats of decision meant when they said change is coming. It wasn't even in the seats of decision. It's those that are controlling it. 2 CIA agents arrested by Minutemen while crossing a Mexican border with 1,300 pounds of cocaine. How rude is this, folks, to put the war on drugs on us and steal our stuff and beat our people down, that the CIA itself is agents, and it's being denied. You know, there's a big denial going on, although they can't deny much on this one. They actually had credentials, and then the ultimate decision could not be made that they were not with the CIA. In fact, there's evidence that they in fact were. I didn't even do more research than this report. El Paso, a group of Minutemen watching a border patrol for illegal migrants and drug traffickers have proceeded to the citizen arrest of 2 men in an SUV carrying 1,300 pounds of cocaine. The volunteers were completely astonished when the 2 arrestees pulled out CIA ID cards and explained that they were actually carrying the drug as part of their duties, and that the cargo belonged to the Central Intelligence Agency. The incident took place last night in the Chihuahuan Desert near Texan City in El Paso. A group of 7 Minutemen saw a large black SUV drive rapidly across the border. They chased the vehicle in their own trucks and achieved to immobilize it after a chase of more than 15 miles. Now these Minutemen changed to vigilantes in the report. The vigilantes arrested the 2 men. Folks, I don't know, is there vigilante arrest? So you see a little bit of change here in the report. The point is that there's people out there, and you have the right to make citizens arrest. Even in this case, if some CIA guys are moving some drugs across the border during a time when there's a drug war. Why is your government agencies involved with moving drugs into a country, 1,300 pounds of cocaine into your country? How rude has the government become that I hear crickets? To me, it's just the fact that it happened. I don't really know about the outcome of all that. I don't really care. Have a bunch of people on the border trying to, what they think, protect the border from incursion, and our own government's moving poison into the country to poison more people and cause whatever damage that's moving, and to facilitate the crime of the war on drugs and the judicial industrial prison complex system that this thing fosters. What bribery went on to allow this to happen? I don't think it's even bribery anymore. I think it's just how criminal syndicates do business. How rude is it, folks, that Obama drops a bombshell about what he threatened behind closed doors when told by one of the Democrats who were talking with him? How rude is it when the president will commit to violate the law despite what Congress says that we don't do anything about? That this reflects also what I told you, that this guy, Obama, reflects what Lincoln was. He reflects the melding, the melting together of the cripple of Roosevelt and Lincoln, who was just a lawyer, just an attorney, just a felon, just someone committing treason in the office. That he now brings back the ghost of Lincoln to say, I don't care what Congress says, I've decided this for the country. What he's talking about is the issue where we continue to leave the borders open. We require people to spend their life looking out and finding, and then we find out that's not really the immigrants that are coming in, it's the CIA moving drugs in. But it goes to international now. The same rudeness. Responding to the Iran deal. That if Congress doesn't agree, he won't care. He's going to do things around the back sides of this in order to continue to make sure he's got the deal working. He's openly now declaring he doesn't care what the laws of Congress make. This is just another evidence of a failure here, and I hear crickets. I see no mass movement of anything going on. It's kind of disturbing, actually. Not even in a half-hearted rebellion or protest, even. We got the so-called President of the United States saying it doesn't matter what Congress is going to do. How rude has your government become? That President Jimmy Carter's statement of political bribery, as referencing now through the ability to steal, making bribes to steal from the public treasury in the face of the government of the United States, now opening up the so-called printing press. These are just digits, adding more memory to the computer to bring on the gobzillions and trillions. How much more rude is your society getting? How will your patriotism rise to meet it, folks? How easily are you going to be divided inside? Get one faction fighting against the next. It's all here today, folks. It's not even hard to understand. The tyranny is just everywhere, and they just keep it under the simmer. They just get you to do what you're going to do. They don't mess with too many of you at once. Again, international law of nature. They talked about the law of nature. The law of nature is you don't piss off the natives. It's that simple. It became an international law because the invaders always knew they didn't have enough forces to literally hold the whole nation if it rose up and threw them back out. So for all you firearm chest-beaten mongrels out there, thinking you think that your technology and your gun's going to save some, I don't know about you. They've stolen the country right from underneath your nose. And if you think your little pea shooter is going to come up against the technology that they've got on tap, I think you better think again. That's really a fool's errand, it seems to me. Maybe, I don't know. I've never been savvy to some of this stuff. I just kind of take a distant view. But with all the new technology that they got and some of the stuff we don't even know about, I'd be hard-pressed to say how your 30-06, whatever, your AK-47, your AR-15, whatever, your shotgun over and under, whatever the heck it is, your 55 magazine round, 33,000 round a second pea shooter is going to handle that hellfire coming from on high. I just don't see it. So we got to rethink about how this is all going. We got to consider we were living in the system as observed by people hundreds of years before us have seen the decline of a system that had the promise to go just the other way. And we let the fallen nature take us over without a shot, and I don't mean that, I mean more without a peep. Without a peep. To the point that when you try to give even the fictional legal out to people, the tyranny will come to stomp on you. Georgia is suing a man for an act of terrorism, publishing the state laws online. Did you hear that? Georgia is suing a man for an act of terrorism, publishing the state laws of Georgia online. This happens to be the annotated laws. This is the statutes as conditioned by court decisions and rules and all this other stuff. The state of Georgia is taking private copyright possession of those. Now, a couple of states, or at least I think a couple of states, have tried to do this on their published statutory code, the revised statutes. Understand that's a takeover statute as well. That's telling you that this is an occupying force. Just the fact that they're revised statutes. They tell you by that also it's in a corporate capacity. Right? So this is how that's working. It doesn't mean you are. It doesn't mean that you actually fit. In fact, if you understand that, that's your distinction, that you make the difference, that they can't reach out and grab you without committing the felony. But Georgia is now saying it's not their statutory code that we're gonna have a copyright on. No, it's these annotated statutes. The ones that we create by our system, we're taking private possession of those so that no one can print those. Unless you want to go buy them for thousands of dollars through probably West Publishing, another bar association, bar affiliate, to control this knowledge. These guys being charged with terrorism for printing a copyright material that even if it's copyright written is not a terrorism, is it? But this is how the tyranny goes. When I tell you about you have to be ready for the unexpected, this is small time, but this is where they're willing to go. It gets worse. It's going to get worse, and it's going to continue to get worse until you say no. I don't mean just sit there and say it. I mean actually step up and do something to stop it. How bad does it start to get? As I've said before, England gives us the lead of what's coming. 3-year-old London child deemed extremist placed in government re-education program. A 3-year-old, folks. Not only can you not print they claim that the annotated state, the corporate rules and decisions are all somehow privatized now and copyrightable. They now determine that a 3-year-old can be a terrorist. Oh, by the way, on that other stuff, they can't, public laws, general laws, they can't copyright. That's already pretty much been determined, except the state of Oregon decided they were going to go after somebody and they were going to stop them in the very same thing for the statute laws, not the annotated version, but the statute laws. And what happened eventually was that the Bar Association decided to drop the resistance. I think they realized they were going to lose, and so they didn't want to push a bad situation. Now, what Georgia has done is they said, well, that's not the statute laws, it's our annotated versions. They're saying those are privatized. Well, folks, if the annotated are privatized, then the normal ones are privatized as well. Because you can't get, and they're not disclosing the full body of law to give you the notice the law requires. So my observation on that, if you go to anybody in Georgia, contact them to get in touch with that guy and say, listen, challenge him. Challenge the government to show that it's private, and when they do, then declare it doesn't apply to you, a private man or woman. It's corporate. It's private to them. That the statutes don't apply. The annotated versions and the annotated basis of it and the basis from it, the actual revised statutes, do not apply to people. Use this case, I would concede the copyright violation, and then I would declare that their law did not apply to me, because it's private. See, this is the fine line that Oregon knew that they were treading on, that they must have got wind, someone seen that was going to be coming down, and anybody could challenge if they want to privatize this, then it's not public law, because it's not public law, it's private. That's why Georgia's doing this. So to me, again, opportunities are everywhere. Georgia, this guy in Georgia has a great opportunity not to fight the fact of printing the private laws on the internet, but to show that it doesn't apply at all. It's private, copyrightable, private, copyrightable, private, copyrightable. It means it's not public. It's not a general law. It's a private, corporate, legal entity's laws. And their statutes say they can impose those. What you never do is say, but I'm not underneath that. There's no application for me agreeing to that. You're violating all kinds of laws here now. Not that they care, but you get to say it. You're forcing an association I have not consented to. That's a violation of the Constitution, which even as an occupying force, you have to agree to, though you have the right to change it over time. You never did. I hope you're taking notes on some of this stuff. It's pretty simple how we address this. This guy getting hit in Georgia, I thought this was great. I'd concede the copyright if they would concede the laws were not generally applicable. And then I'd say, okay, well, the money that I owe you is also fiction, so that's what I'm paying you in. You're paid. Discharge the debt. Use the federal law to do it. And then what, folks? You got record that those so-called Georgia laws are actually private corporate laws. It's over. They can apply to all the corporations and those that need legal defense. This happens in every state, and I hear crickets. Back to the 3-year-old. The United Kingdom has gone batty, crazy. There is simply no other way to put it. I warned about Britain's war on toddler terrorists, and this is written by Mike Krieger of a Liberty Blitzkrieg blog. He warned about the war on toddler terrorists earlier this year, and here's an excerpt. Nursery school staff and registered child minders must report toddlers at the risk of becoming terrorists. Toddlers at the risk of becoming terrorists under counterterrorism measures proposed by the government. The directive is contained in a 39-page consultation document issued by the Home Office in a bid to bolster its private anti-terrorism plan. The document accompanies the counterterrorism security bill currently before Parliament. It identifies nurseries and early years child care providers along with schools and universities and having a duty, quote, to prevent people being drawn into terrorism. Do-gooders, folks. But here it is, in Britain, coming your way. Never fear, good citizens of Great Britain. While your government actively does everything in its power to protect criminal financial oligarchs and powerful pedophiles, Her Majesty draws a line at toddlers' thought crime. We learn from the Independent, a 3-year-old child from London is one of the hundreds of young people in the capital who have been tipped as potential future radicals and extremists. As reported by the Evening Standard, 1,069 people have been put in the government's anti-extremism channel process, the de-radicalization program at the heart of the government's PREVENT strategy. This is PREVENT, folks. Remember, we were talking about the precautionary principle. This is the international order. Precautionary principle rules. There's no reason behind it. It's just what they're going to do. It's just cause, not just cause. The 3-year-old in the program is from the borough of Tower Hamlets and was a member of a family group that has been showing suspect behavior. Since September 2014, 400 under 18s, including teenagers and children, have been referred to the scheme. It's all a scheme and artifice. It's all an organized crime, what they're putting on people. And so this is in Britain. I won't go any more to tell you that now you tie this to suspect knowledge, and you want to tie this to your data, your clothes you wear, your phones that record everything, your Windows 10 that's looking at your emails, and you tell me whether or not this prevent strategy, the precautionary principle, is not going to be in your life soon. They make this stuff up. I told you about that. They can indict a ham sandwich, get a conviction. They can say a 3-year-old has suspicious, extremist, terroristic tendencies. And we have to protect you from yourself. This is the future, and it's on steroids of what everything we were ever told. And we can accept it by being silent to it. Fascinating, the things they put on you. Now, understand that they have their own standards and so-called morals that they're going to put on this. Remember, they're teaching kindergartners sexual activities. They are pumping them full of vaccines. They are programming them. They are doing everything. These little beasts of future burden here are coming on. They're being trained to be that beast of burden. That this whole thing is destructive of the people, and more importantly, the families. That I found that this is an agenda that's working. Whatever the source, we can go to quite a few different places that look like they certainly have a major influence, major things in the world playing out. That I found this next little thing with speaking to the government coming in underneath these frivolous and arbitrary and capricious and unsubstantiatable conditions, as saying a 3-year-old of all could be a terrorist, that we're going to prevent that. We're going to protect you. The precautionary principle is how we rule, not law, just the precautionary principle of what I feel you should do. We're going to put our culture, we're going to transform the future that we want on you. Started to come out a little bit here in another story that I thought was very important, that there are people that are protective of their customs and cultures. That this came out here, I wasn't going to even talk about it, then it occurred to me what I could see in it. 10 million Africans tell Obama, take your gay agenda and shove it. Now, I don't know if he actually said that, but because I can't find that he actually said it, but that was the gist of the point. What happened is Obama went to Kenya, and there was lots of quips and jokes about it. I didn't want to cover it. I don't want to go into more. But a letter was sent by the Kenyan people, government, the representatives, and they said that they would like to have not the gay talk, but they would have rather have heard the unqualified one talk of development and cooperation and long-term relationship that Kenya has had with America. Speak to that. But the letter went on to say, but about your beliefs and culture, keep off. I thought this was very, very important. According to Bishop Mark Kariuki, who led the alliance against Obama, the Christians in Kenya do not appreciate the way the president has, quote, used previous trips to Africa to urge governments to respect gay rights. The letter was therefore meant to serve as a warning to Obama. Kariuki stated, the family is the strength of a nation. If the family is destroyed, then the nation is destroyed. So we don't want to open doors for our nation to be destroyed. I thought that was a very powerful acknowledgement. When you take out custom and culture and the law and natural processes that you destroy, you open the door for nations to be destroyed. How rude are we, folks, that we have allowed our own nation to have these doors open. That this Kenyan representative identified that they are standing up and saying, we don't consent to bring this in because we are knowing that it will destroy our nation. I'm not even talking about thinking one way or the other about homosexuality. I'm talking about people having a bright line principle in their life that when they see a threat to it, call it out. That we in the United States of America have failed to do, and why we are so rude right now, why we have political bribery to the highest levels, why corporatism is actually running roughshod over all of us, is because we have not stepped up. We did not say, we will not allow you to destroy our families. We will not allow you under the color of this authority to destroy ultimately our nation, take away our way of life. As I keep telling you, this is what's under threat. When the imposition, let's say, of, we call it Agenda 21, sustainable development, where foreigners come in and look nice and smile and pat you on the back and then stab you in the back with the other hand. That's what we're dealing with, that we never identified these people and said, stop. They did it in Kenya. I always find it fascinating how people in a supposedly unfree, uncivilized places, third world nations, actually have better principles and are ready to assert them than the United States of America, that was supposed to be, the beacon of all that. Shame on us. Shame on us. So what have I been talking about? The attack on our families. What are all these policies that we've been accepting that we have outpourings of resistance, which I'm happy to see, that we need to organize up a lot better. They beat you down health-wise. As I said, you don't have your health, you probably don't have a whole lot. You're not going to focus on a whole lot beyond you just trying to make it to the next step of wherever you think you thought you were going, if you are able to move. If you have a mind left to do so. That one of the main assaults has been vaccines, and that the 3-year-old is indicative of the attack on toddlers. Is this an attack on newborns, an attack on it ultimately is on the family. This rights of child was a foreign imposition. It's no different than the rights, the human rights. It's animal rights. They're given by people who think that they're not, who think that they're above it all, who decide for you what you are worthy of holding, whether or not you piglet sow was able to hold your little piglet babies. You are not going to be able to do that because we say so, just cause and just cause. We're here to say it, and that's it, and you're powerless to say anything about it. That's all this human rights is about this reflexive law. I keep telling you it's coming. That's what you're seeing in the UN human rights, that it's been determined that they need people to be harmed. Besides, it's good business. Look at the abortion thing that's come on. As I talked last week, it's parts is parts, folks. It's just good for the bottom line. Vaccines is the same thing, and it's been a denial of whether it hurts anybody and whether or not it helps. Again, fallacious, it's like climate change. Fallacious principles, I can't call them principles, fallacious notions and ideas, unsupportable in any other thing, and they block the proofs to show the contrary, and they have a mechanism and lobbying to create the systems to obstruct you. It's slowly starting to come out that the vaccines cause death, injury, and death. And it came from the Department of Justice of the United States. I've got a link for you. The Department of Justice issues a report on vaccine injuries and deaths every quarter to the Advisory Commission of Childhood Vaccines. And again, this is the monitoring, evaluation, and then action and adaption. This is why they do this these advisory things. This is the data that they're going to evaluate. And what they do, we saw post-market analysis that came right. I told you this years and years ago, that the pharma and the WHO, not the OWL, not the ROT group, but the WHO, World Health Organization, they look at the damage they're doing and they evaluate whether or not they can maintain and justify that damage. And if so, they'll continue. If not, they have to adjust a little bit. And their post-market analysis is the evaluation part of the monitor, evaluation, and then adapt principle. It's all sitting right here for us to see that this report coming from the DOJ showed a ton of things going on that they've been denying. 103 of the settlements were listed in the report, giving the name of the vaccines, the injury, and the amount of time the case was pending before settlement. 4 of those settlements were for deaths linked to vaccines, with 3 deaths related to the flu shot and the 1 death for the hepatitis B shot, typically given to newborns. You figure that one out, folks. Guess just cause. 74 of the 103 settlements were for injuries and death due to the flu shot, and the majority of flu shot injuries were for Guillain-Barré syndrome. Folks, you need to get this report. You need to see there is harm from these vaccines. There's a denial. I'm telling you that this is the acceptable harm that the government's willing to pay for and to continue, and that means they don't care about any one of you if you're the 103 settlements. It doesn't count all the cases that didn't get settled, or those that were thrown out, or those that won't be heard because they made policies inside this vaccine special claims court. This is the evidence coming from the DOJ that vaccines do cause harm and death. Bombshell, CDC destroyed vaccine documents, Congressman reveals. As a follow-up of a whistleblower, a congressman is now calling attention to the whistleblower's testimony that they determined certain lots of documents would not be part of their review so they could show the outcome. Outcome-based, folks. Outcome-based education, outcome-based ruling. This is reflexive condition. It's reflexive to the eventual need and outcome of those in the seat of decision. The CDC co-authors, and this is again from John Rappaport. He's been, I just can't tell you how much he hits on all cylinders. You need to follow him. You need to keep track of what he does. He points you to these documents that'll prove all this stuff out. This is another side of the war that's against you. You can get vaccines if you want. I suggest that you get a little bit of knowledge. We're finding that these things are not so safe, and I think that's a disclosure that needs to be made so that you can make at least an informed study if you still choose to do it. There's a whole other study that says depending on when you get them and how many you get, maybe a good cause of that as well. See, they don't even want to do that study in order to find out that there might be a better way to do this. They may not have to put the poisons into it. They may not have to do what they're doing, and yet no one wants to pay attention. Why? Because I think it's about the bottom line. They can make so much more money jabbing your little ones with 69 new vaccines. The CDC co-authored scheduled a meeting to destroy documents related to the MMR vaccine study. The remaining 4 co-authors all met and brought a big garbage can into the meeting room and reviewed and went through all the hard copy documents that we had thought we should discard and put them in a huge garbage can. So says William Thompson, CDC researcher involved in authoring that paper. On July 29th, United States Congressman Bill Posey made his last stand on the floor of the House. Granted 5 minutes to speak, he laid bare the lying of the CDC in a now famous 2004 study that exonerated the MMR vaccine and claimed it had no connection to autism. No connection to autism was a lie. And so it's coming out, folks. Again, I say here there's evidence. You pick up this stuff as evidence. All those people in California, it's evidence. Don't let this go without being used. My Blogcaster page is really just evidence. It's places to go find evidence. It's points to put together to create causes of defenses and remedy. You got the evidence now of the vaccine whooping cough. 70 diagnosed in Reno. Guess what? They all had the vaccine for it. That's the story. I could stop right there. I don't have to read. I'm looking at a paragraph of stuff to read. All the whooping cough, the micro outbreak, had to do with the vaccine. Fascinating. Go ahead. Take it if you want, but I don't know what it's going to do for you. Why isn't this front page news? Why isn't this frontline action? Is kind of a mystery to me. As they put all this stuff in their pocket, the gobzillions go to them and not you, even though you served to protect it all. We hear that 34,000 veterans missed out on health care based on intentional backlog, says another whistleblower. Scott Davis, a program specialist of Department's Enrollment Center in Atlanta, has accused the VA of purposely delaying action on 34,000 veteran benefit applications, given they did not include verified income information, data that is not required for veterans to receive benefits. Davis reported, Lee told Senator John Isaacson of Georgia that Georgia is where they're suing. This is where they're suing the guy for putting out the private law that's annotated by them, these private professions. Georgia, that 18,000 veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan were waiting to hear of their pending applications, while 16,000 others lost eligibility after the VA ignored their applications for 5 years. Veterans have 5 years after their discharge from the service to apply for benefits. And the Washington Examiner reported, Davis said the VA sat on many of the applications in question, marking them as pending until eligibility ran out. This is not an accident, not when you get those numbers, Davis told the Examiner. The VA, again, intentionally has artificial barriers to reduce the number of people who can use the system. Folks, if you know a veteran or you are a veteran, here is a piece of evidence that if you were denied or someone you know was denied benefits, that you need to step up and help them out by letting them know that they were wrongly, they were damaged and harmed by this type of action. This is a trust breach of the highest levels, that if people would just understand how this works, they can get this information for themselves, and then you can go back after this and maybe you can get your benefits. Maybe you can get in touch with the senator. Maybe he can get another bill to make this thing work. You get your benefits. Don't give up. Don't sit back because they said no. See, this is what we do. They either say no or they don't say no. And we say nothing. And this is a battle. This is your government battling you. When is it going to come clear to people? You fought for a government that used you as fodder. You defend as patriotism, a rude government. I read it, folks. I read the guys who think about this stuff say it for us. Better than I'll ever be able to get to it. And yet, you know, after having to look at it, I have to come to the same conclusions. I couldn't originate that thought, but you know what? I found the same condition. I found the same condition. How long have I told you about having the system use division against you? How many talk about when I went to gobzillions? Why did I even point out the gobzillions? It's because the Treasury was broke. Those in the seat of decision had figured out how to plunder the Treasury. It was done, folks. It was done there. Your NDAA, indefinite detention, it's done. Why don't I hear a resistance? Why are the crickets such a comforting sound that we just sit there and listen to it? Well, all the time we're being destroyed, we're being harmed. These people in government are just people. This is not a faceless government. These are people doing this. These people need to be brought to a justice, your own. You don't take the justice in your own hands. You bring them into, you file the complaint and you work it through the system. It's full of lies. The whole thing's full of lies, and here's the evidence. I bring you evidence every week of these lies. Something, hopefully, somebody will say, wow, that's a piece that I needed to either get started, or this is the piece I needed to fulfill the stuff I've already been working on. That fits this piece right here that I'm going to be using to go and explain to somebody the crime that's going on that I've determined I'm going to stop. These elements, as I tell you, these monitoring, evaluation, and adaptation, this is all part of a foreign influence, an invasion in this country, a sickness that's come in this problem that no good people have stepped up in enough force and focused on the right action, not the action just to get rid of the pain. I'm talking about the right action to eliminate it completely and eliminate the cause of it. It's a whole different approach. We have evidence everywhere of the frauds upon us, the fact of the deception that's going on. We have one more here for evidence, if you want. It said better than me, a video. Co-founder of Greenpeace tells the truth of CO2. I've been doing this for years, saying the same thing as this guy does much better, does more succinctly. You don't have to listen to me. I don't have to be the only source of information. Dr. Patrick Moore, who was one of the original founders of Greenpeace, who left the organization in disgust of their current political zealotry, and Greenpeace is now trying to have him erased from history for daring to do that. He has now produced this interesting video in conjunction with the Prager University that is sure to put some people into conniption fits. He goes through and explains this thing on this deception that's been put on us that comes as a plunder in your life that eventually causes you taxation values out of your pocket, a devaluation at some level because of the manipulation of the fuel that they're going to be using, that they use now, this carbon credit economy, what may be one of the things they're going to go to internationally. This exposes more in a succinct, it's only 4-minute statement, I think it looks like here, on points that you can make up, that when it comes around to you, or you can go out to help somebody else who's fighting this, you can put the facts to people, and more importantly, educate the people looking on than the people that are sitting in the decision that have already sold their soul, that you become the point of the spear, that part changes in your world. The deception stops. The lies aren't continued. The plunder is eliminated. Because we gave a damn. We cared enough. Because ultimately it's our responsibility. In every analysis, it's our responsibility. That ultimately we have to do what we have to do. We can't dial 911. We already know doing that 2 minutes, you need some kind of response in 2 seconds, and 20 minutes later you might get help, and they're taking a report. That ain't going to work. We've got to take more of a hands-on immediacy to this. As this next report examples to us, we have right to do. No cops around. Man with concealed weapons. Carry permit stops mass shooter. They're programming this to be in the world, folks. You are going to have to put this as part of your equation, and you're going to have to decide to put yourself into a future time that maybe one day you're faced with this, and what will be your decision? Your decision will have been made not then, it'll be made today. Did I decide to prepare myself to the battlefield that they divided us into, that we are engaged in, and will I be a victim to that, or will I be taking the responsibility to be in that moment and be responsive in a more proper way in the moment? A mass shooter in Cincinnati, Ohio, was just stopped in his tracks. A 62-year-old gunman took aim and fired at four people, including a 1-year-old boy. The people had been looking everywhere for a cop once the man began harassing a woman, but as the old adage says, there was no cop around when you needed one. Instead, a citizen who was armed with a self-defense pistol and a concealed carry permit saw the Thomas McCary arguing with the woman, his sister, around 8 p.m. Sunday night, and decided to make sure everything was all right. Ewing didn't get hit, but he did get his own gun and returned fire, wounding McCary in the leg. Ewing had a concealed weapons permit. Why this keeps coming up, why we keep needing this permit to defend ourselves, I don't know. But the fact is that the decision to carry a self-protection appliance actually saved others. That if you don't make this decision in the world we're walking into, well, I don't know. You're going to have to make that decision when you now know you should have made the decision and you don't, and you either get hurt, your little one gets hurt, or so you see someone go down because you weren't prepared. How many people there looked around for a cop and there was none? You needed immediate response. That felony actions going on, and nobody could respond except for the one gentleman who had decided years ago to be prepared. These permits also, they're making it kind of an obstructive. We need people to engage that. The courts have set it up that you need to get permission from your state, even though there's a Second Amendment. I'm not so sure that's the case, where the Constitution gives the right to defend yourself and to alter and abolish your government as you see fit. I don't think that there's any restriction they can put on that, but no one has stepped up. They've remained silent on these points, and they went to a bar association system that doesn't agree in firearms to begin with, so they're prejudiced and haven't fought that. We're so infiltrated and surrounded, we don't even know where to begin, and we go in and make the wrong positions. We just want the pain to stop. We go to someone we think we're going to hand the responsibility over to, and we don't really fully think out the ramifications of our actions, and then it doesn't go our way, and then we get to either defeated or we turn bitter. Now, I've had this story on my tabs here for quite a long time. I'm finally getting to it, but it's a cautionary tale. How rude is a government you live in that professes to be, free and independent and protect property, that you have to have a permit at all, that you have to have a license, that they don't tell you and disclose these licenses or permission to do an illegal act. What was illegal about what you were doing that you needed to get this permission from the state? The whole people. Living free without permission, building without a permit, driving without a license was a report I had a long time back, just finally now getting to it. Though I have a question about him, I thought this interview that Adam Kokesh does is right to the point of the guy that he's interviewing about this point. Someone who decided, I'm going to exist and travel without license, I'm going to build without permits. You need to hear this interview. You need to take stock in what the experience of another man doing this is. You need to understand what he's done when he tells you he finally, of all the rudeness in the government finally coming to bear, he had to do that compromise. Because you're going to come to a point in your time you have a decision to make, folks, because the government, the people in the government are that rude. But I wanted to point this out because, to you, I thought it was a good interview. I thought it was a tale that needed to be told, a lesson to be learned from someone who did it. I've experienced what this gentleman experienced himself, although I've done a little different things. The point is the resistance, the attack, the fighting, what the government does against you, he lays out pretty fairly. My experience was slightly different. I made other certain decisions. But the point is you have to know what you're up against. And this interview was really a good interview for that point. We have these ideas. We can identify and prove that there's licenses and these permits are not necessarily, they're not required, and yet they are imposed. And I tell you, that should be noticed to you that you live in an occupied territory and you have a foreigner that's imposing upon you a foreign law. And I can identify maybe 3 different levels of that. That you have to understand the battlefield you're in. Everyone wants to live free, but few actually walk the walk and stand up for their rights. Of course, the state has created the perception that you are required to get permits and licenses, official approval to travel or build a home, and many other activities that have been established as individual rights by common law and historic precedents. Most people just bow to the demands of offices, courts, and officers, either in ignorance of the law or the law's true requirements, or to get along in an orderly and convenient fashion. Tom Hyland isn't most people. He tells his story of arming himself with the knowledge of state and federal codes and asserting his right to be free. Over the course of decades, he successfully built his own homestead with the walls made of straw bales, and then rescinded his driver's license, registered a registration and license plate to drive or travel on the roads as in his car without much interference. Excuse me, halting. I'm not reading very well today for some reason. He actually has drive cut out of this. So I'm going to rescind his driver's license and registration and license plate to travel on roads in his car without much interference. When pulled over or confronted by inspectors or code enforcers, Hyland presented letters with sound defense of the parameters in his he was operating under. As he pointed out, the Supreme Court has ruled on this matter, upheld the right to travel, Hyland noted. And he goes and reads this letter, and you can read it for yourself. He didn't win every round, and it remained an uphill battle, but he did do it until he was practically compelled to get another driver's license or go to jail. So you need to understand what's happened. I told you last week, this has not come without a cost for me. I've had plenty of, it wasn't just cars. I've had all kinds of stuff stolen by the government because they want to profess this authority. And then I found out it wasn't just about knowing the statutes. You have to know about legal procedures, and you have to understand that there's that corruption, and you have to then address it. It becomes like a blizzard of paperwork that you have to do to start outing all this. But ultimately, you'll find out that you're oppressed, and you're repressed, and you are occupied. And that is where the dividing line comes. But until you get there, you don't know nothing. You don't know what you know. You don't know nothing. You don't have the experience. What little bit you might have done when getting in and barely getting out with the skin of your teeth, that wasn't anything either. This is how infiltrated this whole system has become. That you'll hear the story. I thought this was a very good... to me, I guess you could say it's kind of a defeatist type thing. Well, he had to go back and get a driver's license. But you have to understand what he now knows. You have to understand he still didn't get his housing permits. There was nothing there to be gotten. And so he asserts what he can. The point is, that's what he did. He didn't sit back. He made a decision, he made a commitment, and he never backed down, despite what he came up against. And they give you this decision that you had to make. I had to make it. So I know about making that decision where you finally have to say, what's the best thing you can get out of this in face of this rudeness, this criminality, this treason? It's there. When you face it, and they're going to put you away for a long time for literally nothing, what do you do? And you end up making the right decision. But anybody looking in may not be agreeable to that. In this case, he does everything he can, and yet he still has to go down and get his so-called driver's license, despite the law. And I don't want to say that as a defeatist thing. I want to say, wherever you are, stay where you is, right in the system, because you don't understand it. Use this as an object lesson of where you're going to go, and you still need to go take that journey. And you need to see where you come out, because I looked at this and said, well, he didn't know some legal procedures to really tie these people up pretty bad that I use, that we get interesting results from. That if more people were doing something about it, we would finally get where we need to go. In other words, the way he didn't know legal procedures, he also didn't know his road law, and he didn't know how to assert what I assert is a felony in the office for either conducting a proceeding that took away a right to do something that was lawful, or omitted to tell me something that would allow me to continue to do that. That's a felony. There's no exception to prosecution or judges. That when we bring this point of it out, it seems to change the complexion of things that we're working with. That this gentleman didn't have, I'm not saying that he had to have it, I'm just saying that you listening to him, his example, and what you then do and experience, together with what I'm suggesting you have additional, and enough of us starting to do it, may finally force the occupier out. And until we do, we're all just rubbing our legs together. So this is very important. I thought he had a very interesting story to tell. You need to read it. I got 2 links for you. The Tom Hyland story, you can look it up. One citizen's quest to travel free, claim and exercise constitutional rights, and now alert his fellow citizens into awareness. Absolutely, be the example. And it's not necessarily a negative example, and don't be one that says when you hear one citizen's quest to travel free, and then question the fact that they use citizen. In fact, he's found out he is subject, doesn't he? He found out he is not free. He cannot choose. His will means nothing. And that should be the starting point for our resistance. Because it was supposed to mean something. It was never supposed to not mean something. It was never supposed to be brought into a context of preventative action, or that we were presumed guilty, or more importantly, we were presumed to be subject. Mr. Hyland has proven that he is, and that's a starting point, so that you don't get to the end of it and say, oh, that's where it's going to go, I'm not going to go there. No, that's where he's figured it out. I did too. Now the war begins in earnest. You now have a lot of what you needed. He needs a little bit more. From what I could tell, I wouldn't walk in with his knowledge base to what his next step would be. But at some point, he also got beat up. So it takes a little bit. You kind of have to take a step back and recoup. You got to step back, retreat a little bit, relook at your situation now that you've worked that out, and then set out again. Not sure where he is on that. You need to read his story. I want you to know what the battlefield is here, what we're up against, that these people have no rights, and that you have no rights either, because they are the force. And what I ask you to bring on is your knowledge of this, your experience, and then your added tools that I've learned that I can put on top of what he learned, that we both learned. I'm not here to tell you the news. I'm here to tell you the tools that are there. I'm asking you to pick them up. It's not easy. It's pretty, at one level it's depressing, hear him doing all he does, and then he has to, then you find that the screws really come to him. And he has to make that decision. You have to know that's there to be done. And you have to make sure that, you also notice that he's still working and doing it. He had to make an adjustment, and he's still there to be that example. That's what I'm asking everyone to be. We have to be our own example in resistance against this tyranny that we've allowed to come on us. Because that relates into what we do and we're told to do. You have to have your licenses, you have to have your permits, you got to get your vaccines, you got to be this, you got to be that. We just heard the DOJ saying absolutely the vaccine caused settlements to happen of harm, that the government agrees you can suffer. It's like a crapshoot, isn't it? It's like a lottery. Think about winning that lottery. Oh, they'll pay you after you can prove you got harmed. And what? You more than likely lost your little one, or you're now having to, he or she has no life in front of him, and you have no life. Isn't that destroying your family too? That we have more reports here, for those of you. Thousands of teenage girls report feeling seriously ill after routine school cancer vaccination. What was the main culprit there? A response at Epstein-Barr. Here it is, folks. It's on and on, the deception, the requirement to get permits and licenses and comply. Comply or die. I wrote that back in pre-net 2001. A corporate collective consequence, the current Middle Ages, and it'll be comply or die. This is the condition they put in, and nobody says anything about it. Nobody resists, and nobody resists properly. And they test you on all that. They don't have a right to test you, but they test you. Despite the proof that governments have known over a century that vaccines cause allergies and anaphylaxis. The information is there that's being denied to you, that's being denied by the existence of immunities and a court. It's the same style court you're going to be going to when you get your permits. It's managing the bottom line. And you know the court system is really the bank. So, what chances are you going to have? But that's the opportunity. Because I'm learning stuff I've learned, and I've told you, not like a secret to you. I've told you about all these. I tell you all the time. That we have tools now that we learned beyond Mr. Hyland. What he went through at his time, I was going through and didn't know him. We all learn the same thing. And I'm telling you, that lesson is the start of the work that has to be done. We learn better today. We do better. I agree. I think. I hope. And that's what seems to work for me. I tend to try and teach people instead of judge them. Sometimes I need to judge because sometimes when someone's told and they still act to harm people, now I've got to be that. I've got to make that judgment. But as you learn better, we do better. We don't learn to agree to someone who is saying that their attitude and their opinion is better than yours for you. Stealing your choice, your free will from you. How do you like that, folks? They steal your choice. Why do you think it's theft by extortion for a conduct or an omission where there's a duty? What do you think is the power of withholding the information here? That withholding is a felony or it affects you in your property rights, remedies, natural rights, or whatever. Researchers find textbook-altering link between brain and immune system. In a stunning discovery, it overturns decades of textbook teaching. Researchers at the University of Virginia School of Medicine have determined that the brain is directly connected to the immune system by vessels previously thought not to exist. Folks, they didn't even have a thought, let alone that they didn't think they didn't exist. This is the article I was talking to you last week. We are doing things we don't even know the system we're working on and the interrelation for it. We're giving it chemistry and chemicals and things to affect it without this knowledge. They're just finding out a direct connection between the immune system and the brain. And we're giving little ones injections. We're working people down. We're putting stress on them to run down their immune system. How do you think that's going to make your brain function, folks? This is why I tell you, when I say you have to step back and take the ring out of your nose, you have to really step back and really bring yourself into a neutral place. And then reconsider what's going on and then figure out how you're going to address it so that you don't make it mess with your health. That such vessels could have escaped detection when the lymphatic system has been so thoroughly mapped throughout the body is surprising on its own, but the true significance of the discovery lies in the effect it could have on the study and treatment of neurological diseases ranging from autism to Alzheimer's disease to multiple sclerosis. And we have the proof that autism is caused by vaccines. Do you think that it's messing up with this pathway? Maybe? Do you think they actually really knew about that? Instead of asking, how do we study the immune response of the brain? Why do multiple sclerosis patients have the immune attacks? Now we can approach this mechanistically. Because the brain is like every other tissue connected to the peripheral immune system through the meningeal lymphatic vessels, said Jonathan Kipnis, a professor in UVA's Department of Neuroscience and director of the UVA's Center for Brain Immunology and Glia. It changed entirely the way we perceive the neuroimmune interaction. We always perceived it before as something esoteric that can't be studied. But now we can ask mechanistic questions. Folks, they've been doing all this medicine without knowing this system and connections in the body. They admit here anything that they don't agree with or understand or don't know, whether it exists or not, is called esoteric. This is the best science can do. It's fraudulent. They're dealing in conditions that they have no actual knowledge. What else are they going to find that they just didn't know to look for? Think about this. Really think about this, folks. This is how all of our life is going. They have people in places that are supposed to be experts that have no clue over the totality of the systems they're dealing with. It's a bunch of monkeys moving levers. And we agree with it. New JAMA study confirms nurse whistleblowing, routine hospital vaccine damage happening to infants. You think, folks, it's over and over. It's not my opinion. Go to the evidence, folks. For those of you looking for evidence, here's the evidence. Blogcaster will have the link. Not many of you go to the Blogcaster, but there's the link anyway. I spent hours and hours putting these things together, and I get hardly anybody coming in to actually engage it. It's kind of disappointing. But I put it out nonetheless. The proof is right here. These people that are in government are killing us, are hurting us, and they don't have a license to do that. And when you understand that and you step up for yourself, then we might start to see the change. But it's going to take that requirement to step up and properly. As I open the broadcast, even the mining community is not going to do it. They're actually going to do themselves harm because they've been persuaded by a bunch of slick snake oil salesmen, and nobody took the responsibility to read the most basic black and white law about the concepts that they're dealing with. In fact, if you do even learn the most basic concepts, you see what they're imposing upon themselves and the division that's causing within it and the property destruction that'll happen, or the people that now have to fight against the property destruction under color of authority. The felony is easily identified to be a usurpation on its own. And nobody wants to do that simple black and white reading to find out the basic foundation of what they're working on. That things like this, where we have someone working in the system that comes in as a whistleblower to tell us, yeah, we're seeing lots of damage that you're not hearing about in newborns by these vaccines, is evidence of an ongoing crime that someone needs to step up to and stop. Evidence of things that people are settling. You can be one of these people, folks. Test. You become the scientist. You can become a scientist when you see scientists prostrate before the truth. When they use ridiculous types of theories, they can't even be called theories. They're just these fairy tales that they promote as some kind of a theory, like climate change. The definition of which is strictly related to human causation, and it totally ignores the sun. Folks, that's the main problem I have with it. At any rate. Again, only looking at parts of the system that you're moving the levers with. Become one of these people. Rodale Institute. Organic trumps conventional across the board. Highlights from Rodale Institute's 30-year report. Read the report, folks. You do the analysis. See if they did the test right. Look at their findings. Tell yourself, finding out whether or not this style of organic trumps traditional gardening. You become the scientist that the system of scientists that are paid by the plunder of the system aren't going to do. After a 30-year side-by-side comparison of organic and conventional agricultural systems, the Rodale Institute reports that organic systems match or even outperform conventional systems in terms of yield, profitability, and energy efficiency, while having positive effects on soil, health, water, quality, and rural communities. I would say the countryside. Rural is a derogative term, feeding into the urban-rural divide created by academia and utilized by these people to destroy us and divide us. That here's a study, the side-by-side, that when you do things properly, you don't need DNA-altering chemistry, biology, nor the chemistry to support it. So here's evidence, folks. It's on and on and on. Organic farmers beat Monsanto as a federal judge upholds GMO seed ban. It's possible, folks. Those of you that are having the problem, you check this case out. I'm going to run out of time here. The victory of our Family Farms Coalition is notable in many regards. To start, Jackson County passed an ordinance before agribusiness giants successfully lobbied the Oregon legislature to pass a law banning counties from adopting this form of anti-GMO seed law. In contrast to many other anti-GMO campaigns across the country, Jackson County didn't focus on requiring food labels or to identify the ingredients, which federal courts repeatedly have thrown out as violating the food marketer's commercial speech rights. Instead, activists focused on barring the use of GMO seeds in the county, affecting only a few farms as a way to ensure that crops and seeds produced by many more organic farmers were not sullied. The Rodale test proves that was probably proper. Most importantly, this is the more proper way to stop GMOs seed locally, to understand what failed before and then use the proper application of the law in a subsequent way. In other words, if a lot of us are working on this and we're paying attention to each other, if I go in and try one way and fail, you look at what the response of the amoeba is, which way it went, and you go identify how that you can take and change that condition to get what you need in the next one. If that one fails, you have a backup case coming to look at those two and say, okay, they went this, and this. Let's lock out. The strategy will be to go this way. In this case, they did it in 2 moves. They found out they're not going to go to labeling. They're just going to go ahead and outlaw the darn seed. No mo GMO. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope it give you a ton of information to go use. Hope you found something interesting to give you something interesting to go after. Take the wrong you hear and go make it right, or go help someone to do that for themselves. Do appreciate the support. Please donate to the servers, ucy.tv, worldtruth.org, social network for the server, Real Liberty Media, FM broadcasters I may have, terrestrial broadcasters. All support it, folks. markonthebeast.yahoo.com for content to me. Take care. Talk to you next week.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
So that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just don't